let's talk about the Minnesota side of this, because obviously they now have another very exciting matchup coming up with Dallas. We did our full in-depth preview for this series yesterday. You guys can go check that out. The fastest and best 40 minutes of your life. So Tyler, I want to start with you. What's the single most interesting key to that series in your eyes?
Yeah, I've been going through this because I'm working on a little preview, and I've been like bouncing all the ideas. And the thing that I keep going back to is how important Kyrie Irving's scoring will be in this series. There's not like in the Clippers series, he was absolutely phenomenal. In the Thunder series, he kind of took I don't want to say a back seat because OKC was still like doubling him. They were blitzing his pick and rolls. He was more so looking to facilitate, get everyone involved, and then when needed, he would take over as a scorer in third or fourth quarters. In the Minnesota series, I don't think that's an option. I think he has to be in attack mode from the opening tip, and he's going to have to give you 25, 30 a game. And there's a lot of reasons why. One, I think they are going to play a high drop against Luka. They're going to mix it up with Cat, or they're going to mix it up with Gobert, and they're going to force Luka into either living with those jumpers or the in-between game. And Luka's already been struggling to get to the rim. I think that's going to be an even bigger problem against Minnesota. I think McDaniels is going to be running him off the line a lot, and it's going to be basically Luka's shot quality is going to be the toughest it's been. I think Kyrie, they're going to rely on that second side action. They're going to have to swing it to Kyrie, get the defense in rotation. And also a lot of what Dallas was doing just gets nullified by Minnesota's defense. One thing they were exploiting was PJ Washington mismatches. That does not exist against Minnesota. Derrick Jones Jr. backdoor cuts. That is not happening against Minnesota with Gobert on the floor. So it's like they're going to have to find offense somewhere else. Kyrie's going to have to channel his inner 2016 finals, and that's going to be the big key for me.
Yeah, man, Kyrie's definitely got to step up. And I might just spam pick and roll, man. That might just be the move. I don't know. I'm trying to run as many actions as possible. It's a huge burden just because of this is an all-time defense. Like, you can't overstate that, man. It is huge. And Kyrie can't be passive, man. I think he's averaging like 15.4 points per game in the second half of these playoffs thus far, like something absolutely absurd. But it's not just going to be a flip switch. Like, every bucket's going to be super tough. I didn't go with a schematic key as much. I went with more of a storyline here, like the most interesting thing to watch, and that's just the performance of Anthony Edwards. I know that's pretty vague, but just in the sense that I just think this could be a crowning series for Ant. And, I think that we need to emphasize that this is this is a great team, and it's not just Anthony Edwards. Like, he's got a great defense behind him. Karl Anthony Towns deserves an immense amount of credit. He's been playing so much better in these playoffs. Like, they legitimately can go 7-8 deep with real quality players. But, I mean, this is a real moment in basketball history if Ant can somehow get over Luka. And honestly, for both of these sides, like, we're going to get one of these teams. And I guess you could say that about Luka too. Like, this could be a crowning moment for either of them. This can be their first trip to the finals for either of these young superstars. And, I'm just intrigued to see who's gonna seize the moment, who's gonna be the next guy up, so to speak. And I don't know. That's the most interesting aspect of the series to me.
Absolutely, it's fascinating, and that's part of what's been so fun about this post-Warriors dynasty era is just the continual succession to some extent. And that's not to say that the next guy who wins is just going to be the guy who ascends the throne for the foreseeable future, but like seeing all these different iterations of great teams before the year, even though I got really high on these teams as the season went along, and I felt pretty clearly down the home stretch that these were the second and third best teams in the West, although I was higher on Dallas in the regular season, and now I flipped to Minnesota. Like, preseason, I would not have expected either of these teams to be in the conference finals and to have a 22-year-old superstar and a 25-year-old superstar be the driving factors in that. It is absolutely a really exciting dynamic and an interesting one to track. Ant has been the better player up to this point of the postseason, but who do I think is the better player big picture? It's Luka Doncic, and I do think his offensive mastery is very much going to be challenged by this special Minnesota defense. I also think Kyrie is a very interesting player to watch in this series, though, Tyler, and I agree with a lot of what you laid out because he's had such an interesting postseason. like in some ways, I think we've seen one of, if not the best versions of Kyrie ever, just when you consider like his total impact, the level that he's defended at throughout this postseason, the level that he has been at as a playmaker, and then the level that he has been at when he wants to as a takeover scorer. But over the last few games, I did think that we saw not just a lack of real aggression as a takeover scorer. Game 6, he was more aggressive, but games 4 and 5, also, he just wasn't the same level as a shot maker that he has been. But I think going forward, he's one of the best shot makers that we've ever seen, and he is going to be played much more straight up. I think that that's just going to be a theme for both him and Luka. They are going to have to try to beat Minnesota more as scorers, whereas this past series was so much about, okay, you are going to blitz, you're going to double this much outright. We're just creating advantages, and we just got to get that ball to PJ in the corner. We got to get that ball to Derrick Jones Jr. off the short roll. Those guys stepped up in a big way. Those guys, to me, all outperformed expectations offensively, the Dallas supporting cast, but they also had a much better matchup and were dealing with a more favorable scheme than what they're going to see with Minnesota. So, to me, this series is more about how exceptional can Kyrie and Luka be themselves against a defense that is going to challenge them more than anything that they've seen. And on the flip side, I do wonder how consistently the Minnesota offense holds up, because I think that they do have some sustainable advantages. Logan, you talk about how strength and athleticism scale defensively. Same goes offensively. And we saw Dallas do a bunch of switching 1 through 5 last series. You're just not going to be able to get away with that against Minnesota. Cat's mismatch attacking is too good. Gobert is going to be too good on the offensive glass. And Ant, I just don't think anybody can cover on an island right now because of his athletic tools. Like, the guy is out of this world. But still, we have seen those stretches where the spot-up shooting is inconsistent for Minnesota, or Ant's pull-up jumper isn't falling super consistently, or Cat starts forcing the issue. And that is, to me, the one spot where they would lose this series if their offense stagnated over a few games. But I think their defense is so special that I am taking Minnesota to win this series.
Yeah, I thought of two other things as well while you were talking. Two interesting things that I think I'm going to be looking out for. One is, are the Mavs going to start Lively or Gafford? Because in the OKC series, Lively was considerably better on both ends. And they actually, I don't remember the exact number, but it was like they were plus 30 with Lively, negative 40 with Gafford or something like that. Like, it was a crazy difference. Obviously, he's not 70 points better, but there was a difference there. And I think that's going to be interesting. The other thing that I think is interesting is, who is Gobert going to be guarding? Are they going to put him on Derrick Jones Jr. or are they going to put him on the center? Because Derrick Jones Jr., I mean, he just killed OKC with when they let him shoot, but can he sustain that? Is it a Caleb Martin type of deal where they start leaving him open again and then he starts missing? Very interesting, and I know this would never happen, but I would love to see just the most wild curveball, and the series opens and Gobert's on Luka. And the Mavs are just like, wait, and the Mavs are just like, what is going on? I would love to see just an absolute curveball, because we have creative coaches, but just an absolute curveball to that level would be an absolute blast.
That's interesting that you even mentioned that, because I feel pretty confident that Gobert is going to start on the 5. And then I think that you try to hide Conley on Derrick Jones Jr., which has some issues. But again, I think if Conley is getting played off the floor, like, that's the one spot, we talked about this in our preview, but where I worry, like, obviously you can switch things with Ant and Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker with no problem dealing with Luka, and with Gobert, you can play drop or high drop. With Cat, you have him play up at the level. Like, they have pretty clear answers to all of those different looks. The one is like, okay, when it's Mike Conley who is getting involved in the action, if it is Derrick Jones Jr. who he's on, and Derrick Jones Jr. setting the screen, like, then you pretty much have to blitz or hedge, I would think. You don't want to allow that switch, but then Derrick Jones Jr. has been so good as a roller and as a cutter and as a spot-up shooter that I think that's, like, the one problematic spot. But I just feel like you don't really need to get cute with things in this particular matchup, and I feel like Gobert is going to be able to just do what he wants to as that great interior defender, and then you get him involved in a lot of pick and roll actions as the straight up drop defender. What to you would be the advantage of having him on Derrick Jones Jr. that offsets that?
I think it's just pretty much what we saw in the Denver series. I think when he's on Derrick Jones Jr., he's always on the baseline. And it's like, no matter what the Mavs try to run, because I'm just working through a bunch of different scenarios. Like you do the Luka and Kyrie ghost screen. You can do a really aggressive hedge, or you can do just a clean switch because Gobert's always behind the ball. Or like when they run their traditional pick and roll, they can blitz Luka. Lively's in the short roll. He's getting met immediately by Gobert, and Derrick Jones Jr. would have to make those shots. I would like the odds of making Derrick Jones make those shots. He did it against OKC, but like I don't think that was a faulty game plan. And so I think it's pretty much just what happened with Denver, like just getting Gobert at the basket as much as possible. I also wouldn't be surprised if they put Conley on Kyrie just because it works from a size standpoint. I don't think Conley's at all a cone.
He's not.
The problem is
Kyrie was kind of posting him up though in the regular season and giving him buckets because Kyrie's just
that's
different.
I think down the stretch they would go to Ant no matter what because Ant played really good defense on Kyrie in the regular season. But well, I think like you mentioned, the interesting question will be how Minnesota responds because Luka's going to be putting Conley in the action every single time. He's going to want that switch every single time. So it'll be interesting to see what counters Minnesota comes up with.
The Gobert point's really interesting, man. It's got me thinking too. I think it is worth I think it's worth definitely having him camp at the basket too, dude, just to blow shit up on the backside. Like, it makes a lot of sense. I'm trying to figure out what did you mean by I'm still trying to wrap my head around Gobert on Luka, man. Like, what makes you think that like Luka's not just gonna spam step back threes on him? I'm trying to figure that one out.
Well, so my line of thinking was just start the series like that, not keep it for all 7 games or whatever, and it's just a curveball because I think every single time Luka's faced Gobert over the last 3 or 4 seasons, what he's tried to do is get the switch on a Gobert and then ISO. So they'll just use screen after screen after screen. But what I think is really interesting is Gobert and Luka would kind of take away the spread pick and roll entirely because say you have McDaniels on Lively, when the screen comes, McDaniels just picks up Luka and it's a reset offense with the matchup you want. And so like I feel like it would just be a super interesting curveball. Mavs call say you jump out to an 8-0 run to start the game. Mavs call timeout to make an adjustment. Then Gobert guards the center and it's like, oh, now you're starting the game over 8-0. I just think it would be a fun, interesting wrinkle. And then if it doesn't work, I mean, you just go away from it.
Yeah, that would be interesting. It obviously puts a lot of burden on Rudy to just stand on an island with Luka and defend him really well in isolation. But yeah, it's interesting. It's not like you're at all comfortable just feeding Lively with a mismatch. Like there's just not that level of skill offensively. So I do think it's going to be a really, really interesting, really fun series.